In medieval and Tudor England, one job stood above all others in prestige. Not the knight, not the chancellor, not even the bishop. The most coveted position in the royal court was wiping the king's backside. Yes, you read that correctly. The groom of the stool. Official royal bottom wiper. This sounds absurd to modern ears. Humiliating. Degrading. But in medieval royal courts, this position was intensely desired, fought over, envied, reserved for the highest nobility. Why would anyone want such a job? The answer reveals everything about medieval power structures, about proximity to royalty, about how courts actually functioned. The groom of the stool wasn't just a bathroom attendant, he was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. Let's understand how this bizarre job came to exist. Medieval kings lived entirely in public. Privacy didn't exist. Every moment was witnessed, every action observed, eating, dressing, sleeping, even bodily functions. The king's body was not private. It belonged to the state. Therefore, attending to that body was a political act. Someone had to help the king use the toilet. That was inevitable. Medieval toilets were not modern conveniences. They were uncomfortable, sometimes dangerous. Someone needed to assist, to ensure the king's safety and comfort. But who should have this intimate access? In early medieval periods, low servants handled such tasks. Anonymous attendants, servants whose names were never recorded. But by the Tudor period, everything changed. The position became formalized, elevated, transformed into high office. The title Groom of the Stool first appeared in English records around 1495, during the reign of Henry VII, the first Tudor king. Stool referred to the close stool, a portable toilet chair, essentially a wooden box with a hole, a chamber pot underneath. The close stool allowed the king to relieve himself anywhere. In private chambers, in the field, during military campaigns, while traveling, the groom of the stool managed this device and assisted the king in using it. His duties were explicit and detailed. Prepare the close stool before use. Ensure it was clean and ready. Accompany the king during the toilet process. Provide necessary items. Clean the king's posterior after defecation. Using cloths or other materials, inspect the royal feces, note color, consistency, smell. This inspection was medically important. Feces indicated health. Medieval medicine believed bodily humors determined wellness. The groom of the stool became the king's intimate health monitor. He knew the king's digestive patterns, his dietary effects, his physical condition. This knowledge was power, information no one else possessed. After completing his duties, the groom disposed of waste properly, ensured everything was cleaned, prepared for next use. This happened multiple times daily, whenever the king needed. The groom was always available, always ready, always discreet. He saw the king at his most vulnerable, most human, most undignified. When the king sat on the close stool, he was not a monarch, he was just a man, with a body, with needs, with weakness. The groom of the stool witnessed this truth daily and kept silent about it. Absolute discretion was required. But the position offered extraordinary compensation. The groom of the stool became one of the king's closest confidants. He spent hours alone with the monarch, in private, without observers. These were the only truly private moments in a king's life. And the groom was there, present, listening. Kings confided in their grooms, discussed problems, sought advice. The bathroom became an informal council chamber, where real decisions happened, away from formal court politics. The groom of the stool accumulated immense influence. He controlled access to the king during these private moments. Other courtiers had to go through formal channels, request audiences. The groom simply walked in, anytime, anywhere. This access translated into political power. Want to influence the king? Befriend the groom of the stool. Need to deliver a sensitive message? The groom could whisper it privately. hope to advance at court? The groom's recommendation mattered enormously. The position also came with substantial financial benefits. The groom received generous salary, housing in royal palaces, fine clothing, food from royal kitchens, servants of his own. He often received land grants, titles, additional offices. Henry VIII made his grooms of the stool incredibly wealthy. They became barons, knights, members of the Privy Council. Sir Henry Norris served as groom of the stool to Henry VIII. He was one of the king's closest friends, enormously influential. He owned vast estates, held multiple offices, wielded real power, until he was executed in 1536, caught in Anne Boleyn's downfall. Even then, the position itself remained prestigious. Sir Anthony Denny succeeded Norris. He became even more powerful. Denny controlled the king's private finances, his personal seal. He could sign documents on the king's behalf. He was present at Henry VIII's deathbed, one of the last to see him alive. Denny literally held the keys to the kingdom. All because he started as the royal bottom wiper. Understanding the groom's daily routine reveals medieval court life. The position required waking before the king every single day. Prepare the close stool, ensure cleanliness, arrange necessary cloths. Medieval toilet paper didn't exist. Instead, various materials were used. Soft cloth strips, sometimes wool, occasionally moss or leaves. For royalty, only the finest materials. Linen cloths were common. These were washed and reused. A separate laundry handled them. The groom oversaw this process, ensured adequate supply. When the king woke, the groom was summoned. He carried the close stool to wherever the king desired, sometimes the bedchamber, sometimes a private closet, sometimes outdoors. The close stool itself was an elaborate piece of furniture, not a simple wooden box, a throne-like chair for royalty, covered in velvet, padded cushions, sometimes gilded decorations. Henry VIII's close stool was covered in black velvet, studded with gilt nails, ribbons and fringes, arms for comfort. It looked like royal furniture, because it was. The king sat. The groom attended, standing nearby, ready to assist. Medieval clothing made using the toilet complicated. Multiple layers, hose, breeches, doublets, robes, all had to be arranged properly. The groom helped with this. During the process, the king might talk, discuss matters. The groom listened, responded when appropriate, offered opinions if asked. This informal conversation was where real governance happened. Away from scheming courtiers, from spies, from formal protocols. Just two men, one vulnerable, one trusted. After the king finished, the groom performed his primary duty, cleaning the royal posterior with prepared cloths, gently and thoroughly. This required skill, care, appropriate technique. Too rough caused discomfort, too gentle left residue. The groom had to be perfect, every single time. Medieval kings suffered various digestive ailments, rich diets, heavy meats, excessive alcohol, lack of fiber. This created frequent stomach problems, diarrhea, constipation, hemorrhoids. The groom dealt with all of it, without complaint, without disgust. He applied medicinal ointments when necessary, for irritation or pain. He noted unusual symptoms, reported concerns to royal physicians. After cleaning, the groom inspected the feces. Color indicated different conditions. Black suggested internal bleeding. Pale suggested liver problems. Bloody indicated serious illness. Consistency mattered too. Liquid meant sickness. Hard meant poor diet. The groom became expert in scatological diagnosis. His observations could save the king's life. Early warning of disease. Time to adjust treatment. Medieval medicine was crude, but observation helped. Once duties were complete, the groom disposed of waste. The chamber pot was covered, carried away discreetly. Lower servants handled final disposal. The groom supervised. Everything was cleaned. The close stool, the cloths, the chamber, then prepared for the next use. which might be hours away or minutes. The king's schedule was unpredictable. The groom remained available constantly throughout the day. Meals often triggered need. The groom waited nearby, during feasts, during councils, during audiences, always ready, always discreet, always professional, but the groom's influence extended far beyond bathroom duties. He controlled the king's private chamber, the privy chamber. This inner sanctum was where the king actually lived, separate from the public throne rooms and audience halls. Only a few trusted individuals had access. The groom led them. He decided who could enter, who could approach the king privately. This gatekeeping power was enormous. Political careers depended on it. Want to present a petition directly to the king? Ask the groom. Hope to influence royal policy. The groom could help or hinder. Need the king's signature urgently. The groom controlled timing. Ambitious courtiers cultivated relationships with the groom of the stool, gave him gifts, offered favors, sought his patronage. The groom became wealthy through such relationships, not just from royal salary, from courtier bribes and gifts. He accumulated properties, investments, business interests, all flowing from proximity to power. The groom also managed the king's private finances, not state treasuries, personal money, the privy purse. This included gambling debts, personal gifts, private purchases. The amounts were substantial. The responsibility significant. The groom paid servants, bought luxury items, settled accounts. He knew exactly how the king spent money privately. Another form of intimate knowledge, another source of influence. During Henry VIII's reign, the groom of the stool became institutionalized. Multiple assistants, a whole department, formal protocols. But one man still held the chief position, still had ultimate access. The job evolved but never lost its essential nature: intimate bodily service, absolute trust, extraordinary power. The paradox was intentional: humiliating service, immense reward. This ensured loyalty. A man who wiped your bottom was totally dependent. He couldn't maintain dignity without you, couldn't claim independent status. His power flowed entirely from royal favor. This made him the perfect confidant, completely trustworthy. He had everything to lose, nothing to gain from betrayal. England wasn't unique in having such positions. Every European court had equivalents, but each culture handled royal bathroom duties differently. In France, the position was called porte-chaise d'affaires, literally bearer of the business chair. The business being defecation. French kings maintained elaborate toilet rituals, public and formal. The porte-chaise had similar duties to the English groom, preparing the chaise percée, the pierced chair, France's version of the close stool, assisting during use, cleaning afterward, ensuring privacy and comfort. But French culture added theatrical elements. Using the royal toilet became a social occasion, a levee. Nobles gathered while the king sat, conducted business, discussed politics. The porte-chaise managed this gathering, controlled who attended, ensured proper decorum, maintained appropriate atmosphere. In Spain, the position was sumile de corps, chief of the body. Spanish royal protocol was intensely formal, rigid, hierarchical. Every bodily function had specific procedures, documented, enforced. The sumile de corps supervised all intimate services. Toilet assistants, bathing, dressing, undressing. He led a staff of dozens, each with specialized duties, but he personally handled the most intimate tasks. Spanish kings valued dignity above all, even on the toilet. The sumile ensured every moment maintained royal majesty, no matter how undignified the actual activity. In the Holy Roman Empire, German courts had Kammerherr, chamber lord, head of the private chambers. German nobility was fragmented, hundreds of small courts. Each prince and duke maintained his own household, his own protocols. The Kammerherr's duties varied by court. Some were purely administrative, Others handled intimate bodily services, including toilet assistance. Larger courts like Habsburg Austria formalized everything. Smaller courts remained informal, personal, family-like, but the principle remained constant. Access to the ruler's body meant power. In Italy, city-states and papal courts had similar positions. The Vatican maintained camerlengo, chamberlain. Papal toilet needs were handled by trusted clergy, usually monsignors. The Catholic Church added theological dimensions. Even the Pope's body was sacred, required holy handling. Those who tended papal needs gained spiritual prestige, not just political power. Religious authority. Italian noble families competed for such positions. Medici, Borgia, Farnese, all placed relatives in intimate papal service. Control the Pope's private moments, control the Church. Scandinavian kingdoms had simpler arrangements. Kammerherre in Sweden, Kammerjunker in Denmark. Northern courts were less formal than Mediterranean ones. Climate affected everything. Cold weather, practical needs, toilet rituals were efficient, private, less theatrical. But the position still carried prestige, still meant access. Russian courts under the Tsars copied European models, but added Byzantine complexity, Orthodox Christianity, Eastern traditions. The Kravchi was the Tsar's closest servant. He tasted food, managed private chambers, handled intimate needs. Russian autocracy made proximity to the Tsar extremely dangerous. One day in favor, next day exiled to Siberia, the Kravchi lived perpetually on the edge, but wielded enormous power, when trusted, when favored, when needed. Islamic courts had different structures entirely. Ottoman sultans maintained vast harems, hundreds of servants. The Kapiaga managed the sultan's private quarters, but Islamic law mandated cleanliness rituals, specific washing procedures. The sultan handled his own intimate cleaning, religious requirement. Servants provided water, towels, facilities, but didn't touch the sultan's body in those moments. This created different power dynamics, less intimate, more formal. The Kapiaga's influence came from managing access, not physical intimacy. Chinese imperial courts had yet another system. Eunuchs dominated palace service, including intimate duties. The Nashi supervised the emperor's private apartments. Eunuchs were considered safe, couldn't produce heirs, couldn't threaten succession. They handled every bodily function, bathing, dressing, toilet needs. Chinese emperors lived in extreme seclusion, saw almost no one. Eunuchs became the only human contact, the only companions. Some eunuchs accumulated staggering power, controlled entire dynasties, all starting from intimate bodily service. Japanese shoguns maintained similar systems. Buddhist influence added layers. Kosho were personal attendants, young samurai of good families. They served apprenticeships attending the shogun's private needs. This included toilet assistance, bathing, dressing. But Japanese culture emphasized loyalty and service, not humiliation. Being chosen as kosho was an honor, a path to advancement. Young samurai competed for such positions, trained specifically. The service was temporary, a few years, then promotion. But those years created lifelong bonds, unbreakable loyalty. Former kosho became trusted administrators, military commanders, advisors, all because they once wiped the shogun's bottom. The pattern repeats across cultures, across continents, across centuries. Intimate bodily service creates unique relationships. Trust, dependency, power, all intertwined. The person who sees you at your most vulnerable becomes indispensable. You trust them with your body, eventually with your secrets, then with your power. The Groom of the Stool position lasted until 1901 in England. Over 400 years of continuous service, through multiple dynasties. But the nature changed dramatically over time. By the Georgian period, actual toilet duties diminished. The position became increasingly ceremonial, administrative, honorary. Kings had private bathrooms, modern plumbing, personal privacy. They no longer needed intimate physical assistance, but the title remained, the prestige continued. The groom of the stool still controlled private access, still managed the privy purse, still held enormous influence. The duties changed, the power remained. Queen Victoria abolished the position entirely in 1901, partly for modesty. Victorian sensibilities found it embarrassing, partly for modernization. The title seemed medieval, outdated. The functions were distributed, multiple positions, no single groom. This marked the end of intimate bodily service as political power. Modern democracy changed everything. Leaders became public servants, not sacred figures, not private monarchs. Their bodies were their own. Privacy became possible, expected. Today, political leaders have bodyguards, not body servants, protection, not intimacy, distance, not access. The entire paradigm shifted. Power relationships transformed, but echoes remain. Personal assistants, chiefs of staff, people who control access, manage schedules, hold confidences. They don't wipe anyone's bottom, but they serve similar functions. Proximity to power, gatekeeping, intimate knowledge, these still matter, still create influence. The mechanisms changed, the dynamics remain. What does this bizarre medieval job teach us? First, power is always personal, always relational. Systems and institutions matter, but individuals matter more. Access to decision-makers determines outcomes. Always has, always will. The groom of the stool understood this, exploited it, benefited from it. Second, vulnerability creates trust. Paradoxically, the more helpless you are in someone's presence, the more you trust them. Medieval kings were literally vulnerable, pants down, exposed. The servants who witnessed this became confidants, because the king had no choice but to trust them. Modern leaders try to avoid vulnerability, maintain image, project strength. But this creates distance, prevents genuine relationships. Perhaps medieval kings knew something we've forgotten. Third, dignity is culturally constructed, not universal. Medieval people didn't find toilet service humiliating. We do. They saw it as intimate honor. We see it as degrading work. Neither view is objectively correct. Both are culturally determined. This should make us question our own assumptions. What do we consider beneath us? Why? Based on what values? Fourth, service and power aren't opposites, they're connected. We think serving others means lacking power. Medieval courts knew better. The greatest servants often wielded the greatest influence, because service created relationships. Relationships created obligations. Obligations created power. A cycle, continuous, self-reinforcing. Modern meritocracy pretends power comes from talent, credentials, achievement. Medieval courts were more honest. Power comes from relationships, who you know, who trusts you, who depends on you. Fifth, bodily functions are universal, unavoidable, equalizing. Every king defecated, every emperor urinated, every pope farted. Their bodies functioned like peasant bodies. Same needs, same processes. This fundamental equality was acknowledged in toilet service. The king on the close stool was just a man, with a body. The groom of the stool witnessed this daily, never forgot it. Perhaps this prevented complete tyranny, absolute corruption. Hard to claim divine status when someone wipes your ass daily. Modern leaders often forget their humanity, believe their own propaganda. Maybe we need more reminding, more humbling, more reality. Sixth, everything has a price, including dignity. Medieval nobles willingly performed toilet service for reward, for access. They traded personal dignity for political power, consciously, deliberately. This trade-off still exists. We just hide it better. How many people compromise values for career advancement? Accept humiliation for salary increases? endure degradation for status, the medieval system was at least honest about the exchange. Finally, history is stranger than we imagine, more complex, more human. The groom of the stool sounds ridiculous, laughable, absurd, but it made perfect sense within its context, logical, practical. This reminds us that our current systems will seem equally absurd someday. Future people will laugh at things we consider normal, our power structures, our status symbols, our social hierarchies. All will seem as bizarre as the royal bottom wiper seems to us. This should create humility, perspective, self-awareness. The position of groom of the stool is gone, abolished, historical curiosity, but the lessons remain. About power, service, trust, vulnerability. About how human societies actually function. Beneath official structures, medieval courts understood something modern democracies often forget. Power is personal, relationships matter, access is everything. The groom of the stool embodied these truths, lived them daily. He wiped the king's bottom and ruled the kingdom both simultaneously, without contradiction. That's the medieval job you'd never want, but everyone wanted. The most degrading position and the most powerful. Welcome to medieval court life, where nothing made sense and everything made perfect sense, all at once. That's how the royal bottom wiper became the king's most trusted advisor, through service, through intimacy, through trust, and through being present for the one moment when the king was just a man, sitting on a chair, doing what all humans do, needing help, needing care, needing someone trustworthy. That's real power, not crowns, not thrones, just being there when it matters most, even if it's just to wipe a royal bum.